okay, I watched the interview with Jim Karol, and I thought that was fantastic. I really liked the story about how you both went to Universal Studios and you're both on the phones talking to people and you park, and then when you come back out, you like two of the smartest people that I've ever encountered. Can't remember where they parked, and I thought that was really an interesting thing, especially because one of my questions is, why can't we multitask?
Our consciousness can only focus on one track in the brain and be focused and mindful and aware and do it well. When we start to divide thinking patterns, then we start missing things in one of the tracks. So this becomes an important skill that in the research I've done, where people that do triage in hospital emergency rooms have to actually train their brains to be able to multitask and be able not to hurt somebody in the course of doing a triage of somebody coming into the ER.
Right.
I think your mom is an ER doc?
Yes, she is.
It'd be an interesting question for you to ask your mom, because this is something you could go back and ask her. So, Mom, hey, where in your training have you learned to handle multiple patients and multiple situations at a point in time? And the thing that the science is suggesting is most people are not going to be able to do that because of either what their life experiences are in their training. And this is one of the science debates going on right now about playing games, right? And kids playing video games and things like that. They're finding that kids that grow up on video games can be better pilots in an airplane when they're trying to look at different control panels and stuff like that. Or they're better Air Force pilots in terms of flying missions. So it's an interesting question you start off with, because this notion of multitasking, as I've read over the years, is if you want to multitask, expect to do two things at less than 100%. So what you want to be careful of is when you're multitasking, you don't want to be doing anything that could be harmful to yourself or to anybody that you're interfacing with.
Like driving, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the start of your question because so many people think that they're able to multitask with perfection. And the answer is not, unless their brain is so unusual. We haven't figured out in the neuroscience world how to study it and figure it out. But right. Enough of reading on it was basically saying people who think they're multitasking on both activities or three activities and doing them all well, not happening, because your conscious brain is only going to take one track at a time and focus on doing that well.
Your book, Grassroots Leaders. What inspired you to write that?
So I just give you a quick history. Okay. This is my first book. This came out back in the beginning of 2000.
Okay.
Out to 12 different, so this is called Brain Smart Leaders. And this was a book that I started to study about the human brain, and I came up with a conclusion. Leaders need to know some of these new lessons from the neuroscience world about a brain if they want to inspire the workers and the employees to be the best that they can be. And so I had begun to do work with this brain science and doing different consulting engagements, and I had enough of case studies and stories of people that I could now put into this book and change the focus from the executive level down to the employee level up. So therefore the title Grassroots Leaders. Folks that are in the front line of doing work very often have the solutions of business problems, but the leadership system is not opening up the environment and the culture to solicit their ideas and solutions.
Does IQ have a relation to how much somebody can remember?
I'm going to ask that question. I just read an article that absolutely infuriated me, which was, can you raise your IQ? And my co-author, Tony Buzan, who's the co-author of this, is one of the world's leading experts on the human mind. Unfortunately, Tony passed away a little bit less than a year ago. And he would always argue, if people understood how to learn, they actually could defy any IQ test and actually increase it. I walked away with the thought and said, does it really matter what the number is that we stick on some test? I mean, if you go back and say, does it matter what your IQ is and what my IQ is as it relates to how we each go about living our life? And so here they write this article, it comes out of one of my science magazines, basically saying, can you raise your IQ? And the answer is no, but there are some things we can teach you. And I say, wait a minute. No, you can't, but now you've got this book called The Brain Formula. And so you're promoting a book, but you're telling people what's the point? So now comes the interesting point. I love your questions, God, right? We talk about IQ, measuring intelligence, but I've worked with and I've had the opportunity of dealing with a lot of people that they thought were what we call book smart, but they were people ignorant, meaning that they could have incredible thinking capacities and analytical potential, but they couldn't engage people to follow a direction. And they would upset people and get them annoyed. So I worked for one of the most brilliant minds, and everybody said, oh God, he's the most brilliant chief financial officer that ever had. But he would just demotivate people beyond belief to the way nobody wanted to work for him. And so I walked away from that and say, so tell me, how smart is somebody that has something here, but they can't get people to follow a direction or influence a change in thinking? And you want to tell me that that's smart? So one of the interesting books I read a number of years ago came out of Harvard University. It was written by Howard Gardner, who started the concept of multiple intelligences. And so his whole point was, is there such a thing as just one intelligence that we could measure in people, versus do we not have a variety of different intelligences, of which the probably, in his view, the most important one was interpersonal intelligence? And that if in the world that we were going to embark on, with the expansion of the internet and the exchange of information, if we didn't know how to communicate with other people, then we were not going to be able to be a successful individual. And that research has subsequently proven that out, to where it is social interaction, your ability to socially interact with other humans has now been proven to be hardwired in a brain, to the point where those that have interpersonal skills, and sometimes you call them personalities that are pleasant to be around, are the people that are making the changes that live in the world today.
You were speaking last week about possibly working with dementia patients.
Yes.
A study on dementia patients, which my basic understanding of dementia is the brain begins to deteriorate. So you lose certain connections, and that you can train the brain to filter that information through different parts, so you don't necessarily, so a dementia patient wouldn't necessarily lose it as quickly.
We are going to be working on a Brain Fitness Academy program that's going to be here at the Rosen Community Center in Orlando. They'll have limited to 12 to 15 people that have been early diagnosed with dementia. The franchise on this has got research that's saying it's making a difference with people that are going through this, but it's early. This is like so evolutionary right now. It's not like, everybody's doing this. It's like a handful of people are figuring out what are the to-dos on this stuff. And one of the to-dos are, and you're touching again, I don't know where you're getting all your knowledge from, but you're too young for all this stuff. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, if you can find alternate pathways, so one of the challenges, can you learn something new every year? And so as long as you're continuing to learn new every year, what neuroscience is telling us today is we have actually new neurons that are coming into our brain on an ongoing basis. But if we aren't using those, meaning learning something that's challenging to our brain, then they get pruned out and thrown away.
No. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that you can do is, I always tell this to people when I'm teaching, your New Year's resolution is to learn something new every year, and is far away from anything you've ever learned in the past. And the more you can challenge your brain. So I tell people, gee, when you have problems in your life, that's really a good thing from a cognitive fitness point of view, because now your brain's got to stay engaged to figuring out solutions for it. If you're just coasting along and you're just kind of riding it out and you're just marking the days off, what's the point? What I call, and this is Jim Karol, by the way, I go back and call him the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail in terms of the neuroscience world, what are the best mental challenges that really stimulate the neurogenesis and the connections of new pathways through the dendritic spines, but just new pathways. So it's like going into the woods and generating new pathways into the woods. And so by learning new things, you're generating new pathways. And the more challenging that learning is, the better your pathways are. And then there's a review cycle. What's the right time to review and how do you go through that? That's never taught anywhere. And yet, if you really want to ingrain your learning from short term to long term, you've got to know when to review and how to review. And just teaching people just that lesson in a learning mode in smaller chunks, as opposed to let me do a cram session so I can pass this test tomorrow for my college exam, and then 30 days out, forget it. So Harvard did a study with that. They took their top students out of a graduating class that got all high grades, A's and plus, whatever, on a final exam. And a month later, they gave the same students with the A's the same test, and they all flunked.
Oh, no. Oh,
So
well,
that raises the question, okay, so what good is it if I learn enough to study and pass an exam, but 30 days later, I forgot more than half of it?
no point at all.
So one of the things that we teach people are when you want to bring something from short term to long term and you want to stay engaged in it because it's important, you want to remember it, there's a cycle your brain has to go through to really lock it in so it stays. You know what's frustrating to me with this? We don't teach this stuff in school. And when do we get to learn how our memories work and how we can improve it? And it's you know, I'm still on a mission, but you're on the right, you're asking the right questions, you're on the right points. And boy, if we can go offline and figure out how to get some of those questions answered, boy, we can make a huge difference in the world.
I think that that would be excellent. I'd love to see that happen. I've had a great time talking to you today, honestly. This is this stuff I'm really passionate about. I really enjoy the human mind and how people interact with one another and how they can become better. So thank you for joining me on Tea Time today.
Oh man, it's been fun.
Awesome, good. And I look forward to seeing more of you live with Tony's in the future.
Good.
And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been fun. I love your questions. You have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Tony Dottino. Have a great day.
Goodbye.